Joining me now, former Labor Secretary Robert Reich. Professor, good to see you.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
Thanks for your time. But let's dive into this here, because I think we're close to the president-elect. A new CNN polling from just moments ago brought to us by our Bill Schneider, indicating that people didn't want the second half of the TARP released. People are angry. They think the program is not working. Are they correct?
Well, a lot of people are very angry, and they are correct to the extent that this program has not worked so far. Tony, it was intended to get money to Main Street. It has bailed out Wall Street. And by almost anybody's criteria, this has been a failure and a waste of $350 billion. I think it's a sign of confidence in our next president that Congress, with a lot of reluctance, and again, a public very, very suspicious, said, well, we've got to give him all the ammunition he needs.
Well, Bank of America, as we go to more of the news of the day, is getting an additional $20 billion from the TARP. And then there is this extraordinary plan to backstop future losses. I've been trying to get a real clear answer to this question, Mr. Secretary. Is it the simple truth here that until the toxic assets for these financial institutions are either bought by other investors or the government, the TARP funds will be used to insure banks against really the possible losses due to those assets?
Yeah, essentially you're right, Tony. These basic assets, in other words, a lot of banks are holding assets. They just don't know what the value is. Nobody's going to buy them because they have so much securities tied up in them whose value is unknown, such as mortgage-backed securities where the mortgage owner may not pay back. So you've got banks that really are suffering a crisis right now. They don't have enough money. And what's happened so far is that the Treasury has been giving them a lot of money just to keep their operations going so there won't be essentially a run on these banks. Now, what the public has been very, very concerned about, and I think for good reason, is that the banks have turned around and they continue to pay their executives and their directors a lot of money. They continue to pay their shareholders big dividends. They continue to buy up other banks. They're not using this money to do what Congress intended it to do, and that is to give the banks enough liquidity, that is enough money so that they can turn around and lend to small businesses and to troubled homeowners and to students and everybody else who needs the money.
Oh, okay, and to that end, as you know, Larry Summers, the top economic advisor for the president-elect, sent a letter to Senate Democrats this week. Summers pledging to commit $50 billion to $100 billion to address foreclosures, the point you were just making. He also said, quote, "We completely agree that this program must promote the stability of the financial system and increase lending, preserve home ownership, promote jobs and economic recovery, and have the maximum degree of accountability and transparency possible." What do you think of this plan moving forward as the president-elect enters the room, and then we may have to go, Mr. Secretary?
Well, it is necessary. I think the president-elect has made sure people understand that he needs it, and I'll talk to you more about this later.
Okay, and I think we may have a moment because there's going to be an introduction that takes place. How do you believe, moving forward, how do you believe, what is the best way to use these assets? We're talking not only about another $350 billion for the TARP program for the financial sector, but we're also talking about an economic stimulus package, which the president-elect is about to talk about in just a couple of moments, somewhere in the neighborhood of $800 billion. What is the best use if you were devising the plan, advising the president-elect for moving forward?
Well, just think three words, Tony: jobs, jobs, jobs. And think of a fourth word, and that is Main Street. What we've got to make sure is that Americans have jobs. A lot of them are, we're hemorrhaging jobs. 2 million jobs lost last year alone. We're on the way, unfortunately, if nothing else is done, to losing 3 million additional jobs this year. So that TARP money has got to go to Main Street to create jobs. And the stimulus bill also has got to go out to small businesses, to all of the places and to people in this country that generate jobs. We've got to get the economy back on track. This is what all of these programs are about. The reason that the president got the additional TARP money, even though this is a very unpopular program, nobody wants to bail out Wall Street for its mistakes, is because people have confidence that the president is going to use this money well.
Yeah, but Mr. Secretary, I was struck by something you said just last week, I believe it was, in congressional testimony, that if anyone tells you they know what they're doing now with this financial crisis, they're not telling you the truth. Doesn't that almost require that we take a deep breath and figure out what we are really doing and what we need to really target, as opposed to moving forward with the kind of speed that we see, not only with the TARP program, but with the calls for this massive economic stimulus plan.
Well, Tony, the problem is we've never been here before. I mean, this is not the Great Depression of the 30s. We are now in a different century. It looks like we're heading, if we're not careful, to a depression, but we've got to be experimental. The public has got to trust the new president and his people are going to do the best job possible. There's got to be transparency. The public has got to see, unlike the old TARP, where this money is actually going. And we've got to spend enough money. It's got to be a bold program if anything is going to actually get done.
And as we show pictures of the president-elect touring this facility in Bedford Heights, Ohio, I'm trying to walk us up, if you can just be patient with me, Mr. Secretary, to the remarks from the Secretary, from the president-elect. Are you of the opinion, and it seems to be a growing opinion, that regardless of what we do for the financial sector, there are going to be winners and losers, and that regardless of how much money we pump into the financial sector, there are going to be banks that absolutely fail, and the quicker we can let markets determine the winners and the losers, the quicker we can get to the job of targeting these TARP funds where they're most needed and can do the most good?
Well, I agree very much with that, Tony. I think we've got to make sure that these distressed or toxic assets actually finally are priced somehow, or they get off the books of these banks. Because the banks are not going to turn around and lend unless they feel confident that their balance sheets are fairly good. That's the contradiction that is right now working its way through the entire banking system. We're giving the banks money, and we have continued to give the banks money, but at the same time, the banks are saying, wait a minute, you want us to be liquid, you want us to be safe, you want us to be ongoing, you don't want us to be insolvent. We are not going to lend this money to people who we think are credit risks. And so that tension is going to continue to be there. I think what the Obama administration is going to try to do is make sure that a certain percentage of that money definitely goes to Main Street, that there's more transparency. That is, the public and the media can see exactly what is being done with this Wall Street bailout money, and also that it doesn't go to executive salaries and it doesn't go to in all kinds of directions that are essentially not what the public feels is appropriate.
Is it appropriate for Citi to break up its financial services division from its core business, which is banking? Would it be prudent for Bank of America, which just, as you know, bought Merrill, to do the same thing?
Well, what you're asking now, what I think is prudent and appropriate, I haven't seen the books of these particular banks. Let me just say, though, that it looks like, just on the surface, I don't have any inside information at all, it looks like Citigroup is hemorrhaging about $100 million a day. They've already got $45 billion of taxpayer money and several $100 billion of loans from the Federal Reserve. This could be kind of pushing on a wet noodle. Now, Citigroup is a huge banking institution, one of the largest we have. Everybody is afraid that it's too big to fail. So somebody, and hopefully the next administration, is going to be looking with Citigroup and seeing what pieces can go where, how it can be saved, and essentially make sure that taxpayers are not left holding the bag.
Secretary Reich, we appreciate your time so much. Thank you for the time, and thanks for the insight.
Thanks very much, Tony. Bye-bye.
And let's listen now to the